Have you ever felt like life handed you nothing? Like your pockets are empty, your opportunities are limited, and your dreams are too big for the life you're living? Today, I want to tell you the story of a poor boy who had nothing, but his thoughts were bigger than his circumstances. And what he discovered was this: when you learn to think bigger than your problems, you unlock the power to transform your entire destiny. Imagine this: a young boy walking through life with nothing in his pockets. His clothes are torn, his stomach is empty, his shoes are worn out. People look at him and immediately label him poor, hopeless, destined for mediocrity. They whisper, they laugh. They dismiss him as just another boy who will grow up to live the same small life as everyone else around him. But what they don't see, what they don't understand, is that even though his pockets are empty, his mind is filled with something priceless: vision. You see, vision is the seed of all transformation. Vision is the spark that turns nothing into something, the invisible force that pulls you forward when circumstances scream against you. This boy didn't have money, he didn't have resources, he didn't have connections, but he had the audacity to see beyond his circumstances. He chose to see life not as it was, but as it could be. And that, my friend, is where power begins. Now let me tell you why vision matters. Most people live inside the prison of their current reality. They look around, and all they can see is what's missing. No money, no opportunities, no support. They let their environment define their future. But people who achieve greatness, people who rise from nothing, they do something different. They let their vision define their environment. They see beyond the walls. They see possibilities where others see limitations. That's what this boy did. At night, he would look up at the stars and he would imagine himself in places he'd never been. He would see himself speaking to crowds, building things, creating opportunities, living a life so big it scared him. And while others were complaining about what they didn't have, he was building a movie in his mind of what could be. And here's the secret: whatever movie you play in your mind consistently, you eventually live out in reality. And this is the difference between people who stay stuck and people who rise. Small thinkers look at what's in front of them and say, this is all there is. Big thinkers look at what's in front of them and say, this is just the starting point. The boy had nothing in his hands, but he had vision in his heart, and vision is the blueprint for destiny. Vision doesn't come from your circumstances, it comes from your imagination. And imagination is limitless. You can take everything away from a person, their money, their home, their possessions. But as long as they have the power to imagine something greater, they are not poor, because poverty is not the absence of money. Poverty is the absence of vision. Let me remind you, every breakthrough that has ever happened in history started with vision. The airplane, the light bulb, the skyscraper, the computer, every single innovation was once just an idea in someone's mind. People laughed at them, doubted them, said they were crazy, but those people refused to let small minds shrink their big visions. That poor boy walking with empty pockets carried inside him the same energy. He wasn't crazy, he was convinced. And this is where most people get it wrong. They think vision is about wishful thinking, about sitting back and dreaming without action. That's not vision, that's fantasy. True vision is when you see something so clearly in your mind, so vividly, that it becomes your obsession. You wake up thinking about it, you go to sleep dreaming about it, and every single day in between you find yourself pulled forward by it. That's how vision works. It's a magnet for your future. But here's the challenge: vision will always be bigger than your current reality. That means it's gonna feel uncomfortable. It's gonna feel impossible. And that's exactly why most people shrink their vision to fit their circumstances, instead of expanding their circumstances to fit their vision. This boy refused to do that. Every time he looked at his empty pockets, he reminded himself that his vision was bigger than his lack. Every time someone told him, you can't, he heard, I must. Every time he faced rejection, he used it as fuel to dream even bigger. When you begin to live with vision, you stop living reactively and you start living proactively. You stop waiting for opportunities and you start creating them. You stop seeing yourself as a victim of circumstances and you start becoming the author of your story. That's what the boy discovered. He realized he couldn't control being born into poverty, but he could control what he chose to see, what he chose to believe, what he chose to move toward. And let me tell you something, life will always test your vision. The bigger your vision, the greater the resistance. There will be voices around you saying, be realistic, play it safe, don't get your hopes up. But here's the truth. Realism is the enemy of vision, because what's realistic for one person is impossible for another, and what's impossible for one person becomes reality for someone who dared to dream big enough. The boy kept seeing himself beyond where he was, and slowly he began to act differently. He walked differently, he talked differently, He carried himself not as a poor boy, but as a leader in the making. Why? Because he wasn't living by sight, he was living by vision. People didn't understand it. They thought he was arrogant, delusional, unrealistic. But what they couldn't see was that he had already left his environment in his mind. And once you leave a place in your mind, it's only a matter of time before you leave it in reality. Think about it. If your vision is small, your actions will be small, your energy will be small, and your results will be small. But if your vision is massive, your actions will grow, your energy will expand, and your results will multiply. Vision sets the standard for everything in your life. The boy knew this instinctively. He didn't let his circumstances shrink his standard. He let his vision expand it. And that's the power of vision. It makes you unstoppable. Not because the road becomes easy, but because your vision becomes bigger than your obstacles. When the boy faced hunger, he saw a future where he never had to worry about food again. When he faced rejection, he saw a future where people would come to him for answers. When he faced loneliness, he saw a future where he was surrounded by people he inspired. Vision gave him strength when everything else tried to break him. This is the power you have too. You may not have money right now. You may not have support right now. You may feel like your pockets are empty, your opportunities are limited, and your options are shrinking. But if you can see it here, if you can feel it here, if you can create it in your mind with absolute clarity and emotion, then it's already alive. It's already real. The world just hasn't caught up to it yet. There's a pattern I've seen over and over again in life. People who stay stuck, people who never break through, they all have one thing in common. They live in a mindset of scarcity. They focus on what's missing, what they don't have, what they've lost, and what could go wrong. And because their focus is consumed with lack, that's exactly what they create more of, lack. But then there are people who rise above, people who defy the odds, people who create extraordinary results. They may have started with nothing, but they chose something different. They chose to live in a mindset of abundance. They trained themselves to focus not on what's missing, but on what's possible, not on what they lack, but on what they could create. And that decision, the decision to shift from scarcity to abundance, changed everything. Think about the poor boy we talked about. He had empty pockets. No money, no security, no comfort. Scarcity surrounded him. He could have easily said, "This is all there is. This is my life." But he made a different choice. He looked at his situation and asked, what if I stop obsessing over what I don't have and start focusing on what I can build with what I do have? That question unlocked his future. Because here's the truth. Scarcity is not about your bank account. Scarcity is not about how much food is in your fridge or how many resources you currently hold. Scarcity is a state of mind, and abundance is also a state of mind. Two people can look at the exact same situation. One sees limitation, the other sees possibility. And the one who sees possibility will always win because their brain finds solutions while others stay stuck in excuses. You've got to understand, your brain is like a heat-seeking missile. Whatever you focus on, it goes after. If you focus on scarcity, you train your brain to find more evidence of why you're stuck, why you're broke, why you can't move forward. But if you focus on abundance, your brain starts scanning the environment for opportunities, for openings, for leverage points you never noticed before. You literally condition your nervous system to see a world that others are blind to. The boy understood this. At first, he was tempted to think small, to think like everyone around him. I don't have money. I don't have support. I don't have a future. But he realized something powerful. Every time he repeated those words, he was strengthening the chains that held him down. So he made a new decision. He started saying, I may not have money, but I have vision. I may not have resources, but I have creativity. I may not have support, but I have resilience. That's abundance thinking. That's shifting from lack to possibility. And when he did this, his world began to change. He started noticing opportunities to earn, to learn, to grow, that had always been there but were invisible when he was focused on scarcity. It wasn't magic, it was focus. It was mindset, because whatever you focus on, you feel, and whatever you feel drives your behavior. Let me give you an example. Imagine two people lose their jobs on the same day. One person says, this is the end. I'm ruined. I'll never recover. They focus on scarcity. What happens? They spiral downward. They hesitate to take action. They convince themselves they're stuck. The other person says, this is an opening. This is a chance to reinvent myself, to finally chase the career I wanted, to prove what I can really do. They focus on abundance. What happens? They feel empowered. They take massive action. They find a way forward. Same circumstance, different mindset, completely different destiny. That's exactly what the boy lived out. His family told him, don't expect much from life. Be grateful if you survive. That's scarcity conditioning. But he refused to let other people's small thinking become his prison. He said, "If I keep focusing on what I lack, I'll die in this place. If I start focusing on what's possible, I can change everything." And slowly he did. Scarcity thinking is contagious. You'll hear it in the voices around you. Money doesn't grow on trees. There's never enough to go around. Only the lucky ones succeed. And if you accept those words, they become your reality. But abundance is contagious too. When you choose to see possibility, when you speak in terms of opportunity, when you declare that you are more than your circumstances, you start to influence not only yourself, but everyone around you. The boy's shift began with simple thoughts. Instead of saying, "I can't afford this," he asked, "How can I afford this?" Instead of saying, "I don't have the right skills," he said, "How can I learn the right skills?" Instead of saying, "Nobody supports me," he said, "How can I build a network of people who will?" That one word, how, turn problems into possibilities. That's what abundance thinking does. Now, I'm not telling you this to make it sound easy. The shift isn't easy. Scarcity is the default programming for most people. It's comfortable to complain. It's easy to blame circumstances. It feels natural to focus on what's missing. But you have to decide, do you want to live easy now and hard forever? Or do you want to make the hard shift now so you can live in abundance for the rest of your life? The boy chose the hard shift. Every day he reminded himself, "I will not live in scarcity." He trained his mind. He trained his focus. He didn't deny reality. He knew he had nothing in his pockets, but he refused to let that define him. He chose to define himself by vision, by potential, by abundance. And that's what separated him from everyone else around him. Here's the paradox. When you stop focusing on scarcity, you attract abundance. The moment you stop saying, "I don't have enough," you start finding ways to create more than enough. When you stop saying, "There are no opportunities," you start noticing the opportunities that were always there. When you stop saying, "I'm not enough," you start stepping into the unstoppable force that you truly are. That's what the boy lived. That's what every great leader, every innovator, every success story has lived. They all started with less than they wanted, sometimes with nothing at all. But they made the shift. They stopped thinking about what was missing and started obsessing over what was possible. They lived in a state of abundance before abundance showed up, and eventually their reality caught up to their mindset. Because here's the truth, your external world will always follow your internal world. Change your focus, change your state, change your life. Scarcity locks you in place. Abundance sets you free. The boy made the choice to live free on the inside before he was free on the outside. And because he did, the outside eventually caught up. There comes a moment in every person's life when vision alone isn't enough. You can see it clearly in your mind. You can dream about it, feel it, imagine it so vividly that it almost feels real. But nothing changes until you act, and not just any action, not half-hearted, timid, safe little steps. I'm talking about massive action, the kind of action that stretches you, the kind of action that scares you, the kind of action that forces you to grow. The poor boy knew this. He had already discovered the power of vision. He had already shifted his mind from scarcity to abundance. But now came the test. Vision without action is hallucination. Abundance without effort is a fantasy. The world doesn't hand you what you want just because you dream about it. It rewards those who move, who push, who persist. And the boy understood this truth deeply. He began where he was, with what he had. His pockets were still empty, but his determination was overflowing. He knocked on doors, offering to work for scraps, not because he loved the scraps, but because he knew every step, no matter how small, was moving him closer to the life he had envisioned. He stayed up late, teaching himself skills, practicing, failing, trying again. And every single day he took action. You see, massive action is not about waiting until conditions are perfect. If you wait until the stars align, you'll be waiting for the rest of your life. Massive action means you start now, where you are, with whatever tools you have, even if they're broken, even if they're limited. The boy didn't wait for resources to show up. He used his hunger as his fuel. He used his lack as leverage. He turned his desperation into determination. But action alone isn't enough either. Anyone can take action for a day, a week, even a month. But persistence, that's the real difference maker. Persistence is when you keep going after the 100th rejection, after the 1,000th obstacle, after everyone else has quit. Persistence is when the world says no, and you keep showing up until the world finally has no choice but to say yes. And the boy was no stranger to failure. He failed more times than he succeeded. He tried things that didn't work. He faced rejection that cut deep, and he made mistakes that cost him time and energy. But here's what separated him from everyone else around him. He didn't let failure stop him. He let it shape him. He used failure as feedback. Every rejection was information. Every closed door was redirection. Every mistake was a stepping stone. Most people give up far too early. They want the result without the persistence. They want the harvest without planting, watering, and waiting. But life doesn't work that way. Success belongs to the relentless. Success belongs to those who decide that no matter how many times they get knocked down, they will rise one more time. And that was the boy's secret weapon. He refused to quit. Imagine this: every morning he woke up with the same fire. He didn't wait for motivation, he built discipline. Motivation comes and goes, but discipline stays when you're tired, when you're discouraged, when you feel like giving up. And that discipline turned his vision into action and his action into progress. Slowly but surely, the boy who once had nothing began to create momentum. Momentum is powerful. Once you start moving, once you start stacking small wins on top of each other, your progress multiplies. But you only get momentum by acting massively and persistently, even when it feels like nothing is happening. The boy kept pushing when nobody was watching, when nobody was clapping, when nobody believed. And because he did, momentum eventually carried him to places that once seemed impossible. And let's be honest, massive action is uncomfortable. Persistence is exhausting. There were nights the boy wanted to quit, days he wanted to throw everything away, moments he doubted himself. But here's the difference. He didn't interpret those feelings as a reason to stop. He interpreted them as proof that he was growing. If it was hard, it meant he was stretching. If it was painful, it meant he was breaking limits. He embraced the struggle instead of running from it. Think about your own life for a moment. How many times have you stopped because it felt too hard? How many dreams have you abandoned because progress was too slow? How many opportunities have you lost because you let discouragement convince you to quit? That's the difference between those who achieve and those who remain the same. And those who achieve are willing to persist through the pain, through the doubt, through the silence when nothing seems to be working. The boy kept reminding himself, every action counts. Every step matters. Every setback is shaping me. He turned persistence into a lifestyle. It wasn't just something he did. It was who he became. A man who would not quit. A man who would not stop. A man who would act until his vision became real. And here's what happens when you commit to massive action and persistence. You begin to change your identity. You stop seeing yourself as a victim of your circumstances, and you start seeing yourself as a creator of your destiny. The boy no longer identified as poor, as limited, as stuck. He identified as unstoppable, and identity drives behavior. Once you believe you are someone who never quits, your actions align with that belief, and quitting stops being an option. And let me tell you something, when persistence becomes who you are, life bends in your favor. Doors that were once closed begin to open. Opportunities that were invisible begin to reveal themselves. People who once doubted you begin to respect you. Not because it was easy, not because it was quick, but because you proved you were willing to do what most people will never do. Keep going, no matter what. The boy's journey was not defined by luck, by chance, or by talent alone. It was defined by his willingness to act massively and persist relentlessly. Every breakthrough he achieved was built on a foundation of countless actions and endless persistence. He didn't stop when he was tired, he stopped when he was done. He didn't quit when he failed, he used failure as fuel. He didn't wait for someone to rescue him, he became his own rescue. And the truth is, that power lives inside you as well. You already have the vision, you already have the potential. The only question is, are you willing to act massively and persist until the vision becomes reality? Because that is the only path. That is the only formula. That is the only way to transform your life. There comes a time when all the vision you've created, all the abundance you've embraced, all the massive action and persistence you've lived out begins to bear fruit. And when that moment comes, it's not just about your success anymore. It's about transformation. It's about impact. It's about becoming the kind of person who doesn't just change their own life, but sets fire to the lives of everyone around them. The poor boy, the one who once had nothing, began to notice this shift. At first, his entire focus was survival. He needed to escape poverty. He needed to prove to himself that his vision was possible. He needed to fight for his future, but as he persisted, as he kept building step by step, something bigger began to happen. He was no longer just surviving, he was thriving. He was no longer just chasing success, he was becoming successful. Transformation is not about what you achieve, it's about who you become in the process. The boy realized that the real treasure wasn't the money he was beginning to earn, it wasn't the opportunities he was creating, it wasn't even the comfort he had once dreamed of. The real treasure was the character he had built along the way. He had become disciplined. He had become resilient. He had become a leader. And those qualities could never be taken away from him, no matter what life threw at him. And here's the truth. People are always chasing external results, They want the car, the house, the money, the recognition. But external results will never satisfy you if you haven't transformed internally. Success without transformation is empty. Success with transformation is freedom. The boy understood that his struggle, his persistence, his sacrifices were never just about acquiring things. They were about becoming the kind of person who could handle abundance, who could multiply it who could use it to create impact. As he transformed, people began to notice. They saw the same boy they once laughed at, the boy they once ignored, standing tall with a new energy, a new confidence, a new power. And they asked, "What changed? How did you do it?" They wanted to know the secret. And his answer was simple: "I changed myself first. Everything else followed." That is impact. Impact begins when transformation is undeniable. You don't have to preach it. You don't have to force it. People feel it. They feel your energy. They feel your certainty. They feel your authenticity. And when they feel it, they are drawn to it. The boy became a living example of what was possible, and his story became a mirror for others to see their own potential. But transformation alone isn't the end. Transformation must lead to contribution. True success is not measured by what you accumulate, but by what you give back, by the lives you touch, by the legacy you build. And that's exactly where the boy's journey took him. He remembered the nights he went hungry, the days he was rejected, the years he was overlooked. And instead of letting those memories make him bitter, he used them to make him better. He said, "I can rise, I can help others rise. If I can overcome, I can teach others to overcome. If I can transform, I can impact lives." That was the moment his story stopped being about him and started being about others. He began to lift up those who were still struggling. He shared the lessons he had learned, not from books alone, but from scars, from sweat, from persistence. He taught others to think big, to shift from scarcity to abundance, to take massive action. He showed them that transformation is possible for anyone who chooses it. And his life became a ripple effect, because here's the secret about impact: it multiplies. When one person transforms, they don't just change themselves, they change everyone connected to them. Families change, communities change, generations change. That's the power of transformation with impact. It's not about one life, it's about thousands of lives touched by one person's decision to think bigger, to persist longer, to refuse to quit. The boy who once had empty pockets had now created something far greater than wealth. He had created influence. Not the shallow kind of influence that comes from status or image, but the deep, lasting kind of influence that comes from authenticity and service. He didn't just tell people what was possible, he showed them through his life. And when people see proof, when they see living evidence, they begin to believe in themselves in a way they never did before. That is the ultimate impact: to ignite belief in someone else, to help them see what they couldn't see, to awaken the power inside them that was always there but had been buried under fear, doubt, and limitations. The boy became a light for others, and in lighting their path, his own life burned brighter. And this is where transformation reaches its highest level. At first, you chase success for yourself. You want to escape, you want to achieve, you want to create freedom. But once you transform, once you impact others, you realize the greatest fulfillment doesn't come from what you get, it comes from what you give. The boy had once been desperate for money, for comfort, for recognition. But now, what filled him the most was seeing someone else rise because of his words, his actions, his example. That's the kind of fulfillment no paycheck can buy, no trophy can replace, no applause can equal. It's the fulfillment of knowing your life mattered. And the truth is, transformation is never just about you. When you change, everything connected to you changes. Your family sees a new version of you. Your friends feel a new energy from you. Your children inherit a new possibility because of you. Transformation ripples outward, and impact multiplies in ways you can't even measure. The boy learned that he wasn't just transforming his own story. He was rewriting the story for everyone who looked at him and thought, if he can do it, maybe I can too. He was creating a legacy of possibility. He was showing that it doesn't matter where you start. It matters what you choose, it matters how you think, it matters how you act, and it matters how you persist. And impact doesn't require perfection. People don't connect with perfection, they connect with authenticity. The boy didn't hide his past, he didn't cover up his struggles, he didn't pretend it was easy. He shared the raw truth, the setbacks, the failures, the nights of doubt, the mornings of hunger. And because he shared the real story, his impact was real, it resonated, it inspired, it transformed others, not because it was polished, but because it was true. That's the ultimate reward of this journey. To transform not only your own life, but to become a catalyst for others. To turn your scars into stories, your struggles into strength, your persistence into proof. To take the pain you endured and turn it into power for others. That is impact, that is legacy. That is the point where your life stops being about survival and becomes about significance. So think about this journey. A boy who started with nothing, empty pockets, no resources, no support, chose to think bigger than his circumstances. He discovered the power of vision. He shifted his mind from scarcity to abundance. He committed to massive action and persistence. And through that process, he transformed not only his own life, but the lives of countless others. And here's the truth. His story is not unique to him. It's the story that lives inside you, inside every person who dares to rise. Your circumstances don't define you. Your past doesn't dictate your future. The only thing that decides where you end up is the size of your vision, the focus of your mindset, the consistency of your actions, and the depth of your persistence. Every struggle you've faced has been preparing you. Every failure has been shaping you. Every obstacle has been strengthening you for the moment when you finally step into the person you were meant to be. Transformation doesn't happen by accident, it happens by choice. And when you choose to rise, when you choose to think bigger, when you choose to act relentlessly, you don't just change your life, you create a ripple that impacts generations. So the question is not whether you have what it takes. You already do. The question is, will you use it? Will you dare to dream bigger than your circumstances? Will you choose abundance when scarcity surrounds you? Will you act massively when fear tells you to sit still? Will you persist when everything in you wants to quit? Because if you do, your story will become living proof of what's possible, just like the boy with empty pockets who turned his vision into a legacy.